Do you hear the cracking sounds from the world's firmest foundations as the sky blazes with conflict and the earth groans under extraordinary upheavals? Humanity seems to be drawing closer than ever to the threshold of vanishing. What if the jolting scenario of 2026 was clearly foreseen nearly a century ago by the sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce? He did not merely see the collapse of an old order but left behind chilling signs of a large-scale cleansing. But do not let fear consume you, for in the very heart of the storm, Cayce revealed a secret of salvation. Will we awaken our spirits in time to pass through the narrow gate and find the peaceful harbor for our souls before this reality completely closes? The truth awaits you just behind the veil of secrets. Turn on the international news bulletins. What you are witnessing is no longer empty threats at diplomatic tables. In the Middle East, the axis of conflict has bypassed all boundaries of control, turning holy lands into the furnace of proxy wars and direct confrontations. On the other side of the hemisphere, colossal military pressure surrounding Taiwan is pulling nuclear superpowers into a life-and-death chess game, threatening to tear apart the global economy. The world of 2026 stands on the brink of a total rupture. Yet the most terrifying truth lies not in hypersonic missiles but in the yellowed records carefully preserved since the 1930s. Edgar Cayce, the man dubbed the greatest psychic of the 20th century, rattled off this entire mess while lying with his eyes closed on a worn-out couch. If you're inclined to mock him as a fraud, remember history. It was this very man who accurately warned of the Great Depression on Wall Street in 1929, while the rest of America was still fast asleep on piles of gold. It was he who foresaw the collapse of the great Soviet Union long before anyone dared to even think of it. His precision left the scientific community baffled and the intelligence world wary. And specifically for this year, 2026, Cayce left behind devastating warnings about a red enemy, the shifting of the Earth's magnetic poles, and a global cleansing that is manifesting right before our eyes. But before we touch the most top-secret and terrifying files regarding your own future this year, we must answer an unthinkable question. How could a semi-literate farmer with a fractured education from a remote American countryside plug his spiritual cable directly into the universe's data center? The source of this superpower began with a chilling event. The story starts on March 18, 1877, on a secluded farm in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Edgar Cayce did not have a normal childhood like other children. From a very young age, the physical world and the spirit realm were already intertwined as one in the eyes of the young boy. The Cayce family was frequently terrified to find the young boy wandering alone, talking to himself in the corners of the house. These weren't imaginary friends. Cayce was speaking with the soul of his deceased grandfather. His psychic ability was so potent that he once challenged himself by staring intently at his grandfather's ghost until the figure became transparent and dissolved into thin air. However, the true turning point that would change the destiny of humanity occurred in a secluded forest. At the age of 10, Cayce became intensely obsessed with the Bible. He retreated into the woods, reading that sacred book over 12 times in just 2 years. Then, on a silent afternoon, the surrounding space suddenly grew dense, a blinding light appeared, and from within that radiance a winged woman stepped forward. This was no hallucinatory dream. The being of light spoke, a sound that echoed directly into the boy's mind. What is it that you desire most in this life? Though his entire body trembled with fear, Cayce replied with his purest instinct. I want to help people, especially sick children. The entity vanished, leaving behind an invisible signed covenant, and Cayce's superpower was immediately activated in an incredibly bizarre way. One evening, after being punished by his father for being absent-minded and consistently receiving poor grades in spelling, Cayce collapsed in tears at his desk. Exhausted, he drifted off to sleep with his head resting on his textbook. When he woke up, a miracle defying all laws of science had occurred. Cayce could recite every single word and every comma on any page of that book. He didn't learn with his eyes. He absorbed the entire knowledge of the book into his brain through sleep. His father was stunned, realizing that his son had not been lying. From a slow learner, Cayce rose to become the top student simply by resting his head on his books and sleeping. The strangeness didn't stop there. During a baseball game, Cayce was struck hard in the spine by a ball, sending him into a light coma. While unconscious, the boy suddenly spoke in a coherent voice, giving his parents precise instructions on how to perform first aid and apply herbal poultices to treat his injury. When he woke up, he had absolutely no memory of what he had said, but the wound healed miraculously. The seeds of the sleeping prophet and the father of holistic medicine had officially sprouted. However, to transform this gift into a tool capable of reading the fate of the entire world and predicting fierce geopolitical wars, Cayce had to pay a heavy price, losing his own voice. One might think such a divine superpower would grant Edgar Cayce a glorious life, but the universe always has a way of testing the chosen ones in the most brutal fashion. In 1900, as a young man full of ambition, Cayce became engaged to the woman he loved, Gertrude Evans. He began working in insurance sales with his father to prepare for their future home. But just as his happiness seemed complete, a terrifying shock struck. Cayce contracted a strange throat infection and completely lost his ability to speak. Imagine the despair of a young man whose livelihood depended on communication and sales, now only able to produce weak, raspy whispers. For an entire year, Cayce sought treatment everywhere, meeting the best doctors, but the modern medicine of that era was completely powerless. Unable to continue his job, he had to switch to photography, burying his youth in darkrooms developing film. But then destiny knocked at his door in the form of a wandering hypnotist. After many failed attempts by others, a hypnosis expert named Lane reached out to Cayce. In the quiet exam room, Lane slowly guided Cayce into a state of deep trance. And then a hair-raising scene unfolded. From Cayce's supposedly ruined throat, a strange, lucid and authoritative voice, filled with advanced medical vocabulary, suddenly rang out. That voice did not sound like the everyday Cayce. It referred to itself as we. It looked deep inside his own body, pinpointed exactly which nerves were blocked, and demanded an increase in blood circulation to the neck area. Lane immediately followed the suggestion. Cayce's neck and chest suddenly turned bright red as blood rushed to the area. Minutes later, upon waking, Edgar Cayce spoke clearly. An incurable disease that had lasted a year was healed in a single sleep. From that moment, the sleeping prophet was officially awakened. Simply by lying down, closing his eyes, and entering a state of self-hypnosis, Cayce's soul could leave his physical body and access what he called the Akashic Records, a cosmic supercomputer storing every memory of the past, present, and future of all humanity. But great power came with ultimate temptation. Businessmen and speculators lined up with massive suitcases of cash, demanding Cayce foresee horse racing results, stock prices, or the location of oil wells. Faced with poverty, and despite his photography studio burning down twice, Cayce gritted his teeth and refused every lucrative offer. The ethics of a steadfast Christian would not allow him to commercialize a gift from God. He decided to perform readings only for free or for voluntary donations to diagnose illnesses and save lives. It was this extreme purity that allowed his abilities to reach their highest realm, opening up prophecies spanning centuries that sent chills down the spines of the elite. Before we place our faith in Cayce's chilling warnings for the unfolding year of 2026, let us examine his track record. Why are the CIA, FBI, and leading scholars obsessed with the 1930s records of this simple photographer? Because his accuracy rate regarding world-shaping events was 100%. Take the Wall Street crash of 1929. In the mid-1920s, America was living in the roaring 20s. Money flowed like water. Everyone believed the stock market would rise forever. But during a psychic reading, Cayce looked at a prominent New York broker and warned, "This wealth will evaporate. A devastating financial catastrophe will strike in 1929. People mocked him. That was until Black Tuesday in October 1929, when the stock market collapsed completely. Millions lost everything, billionaires committed suicide by jumping from buildings, and the world plummeted into the Great Depression. The laughter died out, replaced only by a profound awe for Cayce. 2. The shadows of World War II and the coincidence with Nostradamus. Though separated by centuries, both Nostradamus and Edgar Cayce saw the same pack of demons. Nostradamus once mentioned the name Hyster, born of the poor in Western Europe. As for Cayce in 1935, when Hitler was only beginning to consolidate power, he stated clearly that the world would go up in flames. He accurately predicted the formation of the Axis powers, Germany, Austria, and Japan, and asserted that the United States would be dragged into this brutal war in 1941. Specifically, this referred to the Pearl Harbor event in 1941. Cayce even correctly prophesied the deaths of two sitting U.S. presidents, Franklin D. Roosevelt, who died in 1945, and the shocking assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. 3. The collapse of the Soviet Empire. When the Cold War was at its peak of tension, the Soviet Union was an impregnable fortress. Yet Cayce casually declared, "From Russia will come the hope of the world, not under communism, but through freedom." He foresaw the disintegration of the Soviet Union. No one believed it until the Berlin Wall fell and the USSR officially dissolved in 1991, ushering in a new era exactly as mapped out by the wrinkles on Cayce's forehead while he slept. 4. The rising of Atlantis. Cayce did not just see the future, he peered through the past. He gave detailed descriptions of the continent of Atlantis, a civilization that possessed superior technology but destroyed itself through arrogance. Most shockingly, in 1938, he claimed that a portion of the temples of Atlantis would begin to rise from the seabed near Bimini around 1968 or 1969. The scientific community scoffed until 1968, when divers discovered the Bimini Road, a massive structure of squared limestone blocks perfectly aligned on the ocean floor in the Bahamas. The truth was becoming undeniably clear. Edgar Cayce was not guessing, he was reading the creator's script. And now, since his track record has no blind spots, we are forced to turn to the final pages of his notes. Everything he said about the East, the Red Enemy, the disputed waters, and the fury of Mother Nature is all converging at this life-and-death moment in 2026. Put away the historical newspapers and turn on the world's radar screens for the year 2026. What Edgar Cayce advised during his hypnotic sessions in the 1930s is manifesting in flesh and bone right outside your window. In thousands of his records, the sleeping prophet repeatedly warned of a massive shift in power from the west to the east. He mentioned the rise of a red enemy carrying a form of expansionism that would make other nations pale with fear. Even more astonishingly, he specifically pointed to the rise of China decades before the country actually became a superpower. Look at the furnace of Asia right now. 2026 is witnessing the Taiwan Strait being strangled by an unprecedented military blockade. Massive drills, tactical flight paths crossing boundaries, and fleets of warships blockading vital sea lanes are turning Taiwan into the detonator for World War III. The expansion of the Red Enemy that Cayce mentioned does not stop at the Pacific. It extends its octopus-like tentacles across the Indian Ocean and probes deep into other continents through economic power. When Cayce said that this event would cause the old powers to fear, he was accurately describing the extreme panic of the US and the West as they realize they are gradually losing their global hegemony. However, the blueprint for the chaos of 2026 does not have only one front, it is a domino effect. While the furnace of Asia is waiting to explode, the network of conflict in the Middle East has lost its brakes. From Israel, Iran, and Lebanon to the Red Sea, thousands of missiles and stealth drones are tearing through the night sky. Cayce once predicted that geopolitical shifts would be accompanied by the collapse of old orders. The fiery proxy wars in the Middle East today are the perfect trap to exhaust the strength of Western superpowers, creating a massive power vacuum for the storm from the East to officially rise. We are living in the bloodiest transitional moment of the 21st century. Yet humanity remains too arrogant, believing we are masters of our own destiny. Edgar Cayce warned that while mankind is busy destroying one another, Mother Earth will perform a massive purge of her own. If you ask modern scientists what is more terrifying than nuclear war in 2026, the answer is extraordinary climate change. And once again, Edgar Cayce was more than 80 years ahead of physicists. Cayce issued a staggering prophecy. There would be a shift in the Earth's poles. He warned of the displacement of the magnetic axis. Today, NASA and ESA satellites have confirmed that the Earth's magnetic North Pole is moving at a breakneck speed toward Siberia. The consequences are manifesting right in the early months of 2026. Maritime navigation is malfunctioning, migratory birds are losing their orientation and dropping in masses, and solar superstorms are continuously battering the global power grid, threatening to collapse the entire telecommunications and internet system. The electromagnetic storm Cayce warned of could drag the world back to the Stone Age overnight. Even more terrifying, Cayce mentioned the disruption of the warm currents in the Atlantic. This might sound like a boring scientific term, but it is not. If the Gulf Stream collapses, something meteorologists in 2026 are warning about with a red alert due to record ice melts in the Arctic, the east coast of the United States will face horrific flooding, while the entirety of Europe will plunge into a mini ice age. Rising sea levels are no longer a matter of decades away, they are swallowing coastal cities right now. The redistribution of the Earth's mass is triggering deep geological faults, awakening supervolcanoes and catastrophic earthquakes exactly as Cayce foresaw. However, amidst the ultimate gloom of the apocalypse, Cayce planted a ray of hope, a great key hidden for thousands of years. He predicted that as humanity enters a period of fierce transition, such as the 2025 to 2026 milestone, spiritual awakening would lead us to the greatest discovery in history, the finding of the Hall of Records. Cayce asserted that beneath the right paw of the Great Sphinx at Giza, Egypt, lies a secret chamber that has never been excavated. This room contains the entire history, technology, and wisdom of the lost civilization of Atlantis, including methods for creating clean energy and the secrets of existence. If this chamber were opened while the world is in such peril today, it would shatter every history book and provide humanity with the technology to save itself from destruction. The Earth is trembling to clear the way for a cleansing event, preparing mankind to receive an ancient super-knowledge. Amidst the roar of missiles in the Middle East, the suffocating tension in the Taiwan Strait, and the fury of climate change in 2026, it is easy to be dragged into the abyss of despair. But if you think Edgar Cayce left behind thousands of records just to frighten humanity with an apocalypse, you have completely misunderstood the sleeping prophet. Edgar Cayce's greatest legacy is not his prophecies of war or the collapse of empires. His true legacy is the light of healing. Remember why his superpower was awakened in the forest at the age of 10. I want to help those who are sick. Cayce is honored by the world as the father of holistic medicine. More than 80 years ago, while Western medicine was still dissecting humans like soulless mechanical machines, Cayce presented a staggering truth. Mind, body, and spirit are a single, inseparable unity. Every physical ailment stems from emotional blockages and unresolved debts of karma. He emphasized that an alkaline diet, natural therapies, and especially the power of meditation are humanity's only protective shields. If we apply this philosophy to the global stage, the chaos of the world in 2026, from geopolitical wars to natural disasters, is actually a disease erupting from the malignant tumor of greed, hatred, and the ignorance of collective human consciousness. A prophecy is not a stamped death sentence. It is a mirror reflecting the consequences if we continue on our current path. The universe shows us the darkest vision to force us to awaken and use our free will to steer the wheel of history in a different direction. 2026 is not the end of the Earth. It is the greatest alarm clock. Once the night of the old world order's rupture passes, Cayce believed that humanity would enter a brilliant spiritual renaissance, a society where intuition, empathy, and connection to divine frequencies would replace weapons and oppression. Technological advancements will be used to heal rather than destroy. Darkness is merely the breeding ground for light. We are living through the most intense pages of human history, right at the moment Edgar Cayce named nearly a century ago. Now I want to hear from you, those who are witnessing history turn the page. Of all Cayce's prophecies for this life and death period, which do you see manifesting most clearly right now? Is it the rise of the Red Enemy in Asia, the exploding furnace in the Middle East, the fury of climate change, or perhaps the spiritual awakening happening within your own soul?